So the motivation is understanding what the how do you call it, the rewards are around that, and then the punishments if possible. But also from a more technical psychology, they talk of making it more so the reflective is just basically if you have a space to think and it makes sense from a logical point of view, and automatic has to do with how easy is it and how is it already part of your behavior, like it's already part of a pattern. Yeah, but I just want us to think more about I just want us to think more of the, yeah, does it make sense to perform that behavior? Does it benefit the person, etc.? I think it's simpler to think about it that way. And then the opportunity has to do with, yes, understanding the barriers and the drivers, right? So barrier is, are there any impediments in your way from performing that behavior, right? And then the drivers has to do with the existence of the enabling factors that allow you to perform that behavior. So here they put both from a social and a physical point of view. So remember when I said that if you find yourself in a community where they are having that negative behavior as part of it, it's sometimes difficult to then perform a positive behavior because then it's not part of the social norm. So that's what we mean by opportunity. And then the physical just has to, the physical has more to do with the infrastructure, whether the infrastructure is in place. So for example, let's say that we want to promote cycling. Do we have cycling lanes on our roads? Is it safe for people to actually cycle? So that's it. So to cut a long story short, if we really want to promote positive behavior, we have to make sure people are capable of performing that positive behavior, right? Which means they are aware, they have knowledge, etc. We want to make sure they are motivated to perform it, which means that whatever we are asking them to do should be of benefit to them, right? And then there should be what opportunity for them to do it. It shouldn't be difficult to perform that positive behavior. It should be easy compared to not doing the behavior. Or sometimes even if it's not easy, at least they should be able to have the opportunity to perform that behavior. So these are the three things that we have to take into consideration. Then obviously, in terms of interventions, then we can take action around that. So for example, if we want to increase the opportunity for people to perform a certain behavior, we can do things like education. We can do things like persuasion, which is just giving them more information for them to be aware. Incentivization, right? So that they can now see that, okay, what they are doing is important. So for example, if we wanted to see who can plant the most trees, maybe we put a money prize so that if you can provide evidence that you've planted the most trees, then you get your thing. I mean, monetary incentives are like the lowest and the easiest way of incentivizing, but there could be other ways of incentivizing to get them to perform a particular behavior. As you can see, if you wanted to increase motivation, there are also methods to do that. For example, enablement, training, etc. Want to improve capability modeling, which means that opportunity for them to observe someone performing that behavior helps in getting them to do that. And then at the policy level too, there are all kinds of things that can be done, which I don't think we should delve deep into immediately, because I think at our level we can take action. We can take action at the community level, especially. And then obviously we can also make policy recommendations or requests, but that's something that we can look at another time. So to come back to this whole social and behavior change communication topic, let's take a step back into the socio-ecological model that I showed to you earlier. And the point I want to make here is that when we are talking about SBCC, and come in if you have a counter point of view. But I believe that when we are looking at the socio-ecological model, where we are looking at influences on behavior from the individual all the way to the national level, which means we are talking about structures, policies, etc. When we talk of social and behavior change communication, we are looking at trying to influence behavior from the individual to the interpersonal level to institutional level, all the way to what? The community level. That is more like the focus. It doesn't mean that you can't interface with structures, policies, and systems, but I think from a more sort of like practical level, you can look at it from that lens. There's also obviously advocacy, which is, I think SBCC and advocacy, there are some differences, but they're also linked in many ways, whereby advocacy probably goes all the way to these structures, policies, and systems. So the two go hand in hand, but SBCC tends to be more effective at the group and community level. So yeah, this is the proper definition of SBCC, strategic use of communication to inspire behavior change. And the focus is on influencing knowledge, attitudes, and beliefs. And like I said before, it's widely used when you're talking about things like water sanitation and hygiene, malaria programs. Recently, when we had the COVID, it was used a lot to get people to go for the vaccination. And as I said earlier also, the goal is to amplify what the enablers to behavior change. So if there's something that can contribute to positive behavior, we want to amplify it. And if there's something that will prevent positive behavior from being encouraged, we want to what? We want to limit it. So that's the idea. So maybe we just have a quick discussion here. For example, let's say that you want to implement maybe one of the behaviors that you think is one of the more positive behaviors as far as that is connected to air pollution. What might be the barriers maybe in your community, and what might be some of the enablers? So let's take one. Let's talk about, let's say, waste. Let's say waste, how we handle our solid waste management, for example. What might be the enablers as far as waste segregation is concerned? Are there any factors we think might contribute positively to proper waste segregation, and are there factors that will limit proper waste segregation in the community? And feel free to use another behavior that you think is more interesting. Any contributions? Maybe you start mentioning names. Stephen, do you want to make a point?
Not really. I'm not even hearing well. Like some of the thing is breaking, so I think I'll have to watch the rebroadcast later to understand a lot of things. There's been a breakage. My network is not helping at all. I don't know if you can even hear me.
Okay, Stephen, we can hear you. You're having challenges with the internet. Can we have a volunteer? Okay, I'm going to, because I mentioned Ivy's name, I'm going to mention Ivy.
No, I'm okay.
No, so I have a question for you. My question is that what might you say are some of the enablers, for example, when it comes to planting, how do you call it, like taking care of plants or having plants to kind of like take care of air pollution? What do you think are some of the enablers, and what might be some of the barriers that will prevent maybe the average person, for example, from performing this behavior?
Um, I don't know. I think that maybe the government will have to, we'll probably have to revisit the policy on what percentage of space each household should have for plants. I think that when you look at some of our old buildings or older homes, you realize they still have trees and other plants in their compound. But the new architecture doesn't even allow pots on the compound, because it's all tiled up. So if we're talking about some of the things that prevent people from having plants in their spaces, I'll probably say that the current style of architecture is one, or the disregard for laws concerning tree planting and things like that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. So I just wanted to say, so for example, if we are talking about, let's say we know we want to encourage people, right, to plant not just trees, but even like have indoor plants that would help them to be able to extract some toxins in their immediate environment so that they breathe cleaner air. So that's a positive behavior that we want to encourage, right? And maybe one of the limiting factors to that will be that, oh, I don't know which plants exist, right? Which plants might be useful, and two, it's probably too expensive, right? Get the appropriate plants, right? So if you are communicating to people about it, you make sure that you point people in your communication to places where they can easily access what? Plants. So maybe you can point them, for example, to Ivy, and then also give them information that actually is not as expensive as you think. You may even go as far as to say that this is how much it will save you if you actually invest in the plants now, and this is how much it might save you in terms of your, I don't know, your healthcare cost somewhere along the line. That is if you have that information. So that's like a direct way of, taking care of the barriers whilst you are promoting the enabling, factors. And like Ivy also said, at a much broader or community level, where we are talking about the need to plant more trees. How easy is it to access those trees? Understanding what's the expectation from the policy level, how much trees we need to plant, etc., etc. Those things, those types of information might be very helpful to the whole community so that they can then get towards practicing a particular thing. So yeah, so that's these are kind of like the kind of things that we can be looking at when we actually want to do an effective SBCC. I'm sure the question then will be, how do we go about it? So I'm going to try to go about it. And like I said before, please feel free to ask questions, put comments, etc. Because sometimes I know it's a bit of a technical thing, but it's also very easy when you eventually have some of the slides and things, because it's all about taking action from your point of view rather than, this is not school where you have to follow a theory from beginning to the end, but just it's something to give us, it's just to give us something that we can draw on in performing our activities. There's a comment here. Mulumba, thanks for your kind comment. He has an additional comment, but also an enabler can be the knowledge that there are great positivities when it comes to tree planting, especially when it's an economic tree. Exactly, this could be an enabler. Exactly. So trees, if your campaign is about promoting tree planting, then the fact that if you plant a tree, the tree might give you what? Fruits, which will give you some money along the line. That information should be part of what you are sharing. Yeah. When the last tree dies, the last man dies can be an enabler, of course. So it means also educating people on the importance of trees in general. So here I offer some of the steps that you need to undertake when you are trying to how do you call it? Undertake a behavior change communication program or campaign. And I think here I'm going to try for us to just let's make it more discussion. Okay. These are the steps that you can follow, and basically the actual steps that you can take will depend on your exact circumstance or your exact context. That's where the idea of design thinking and analyzing comes into view. We've talked extensively about the socio-ecological model and those behavior change wheels, how it can help us to analyze the context in which we are operating. So I'm sure whilst we are having this presentation, you are probably thinking about the whole thing in your own context, in your own community. So hopefully that would be applied at that level to understand what's going on. So the next step after analyzing the situation, which means that, for example, you can use the socio-ecological model to analyze the community or the context in which you are. The next step is to what? And let me just add that apart from just analyzing things qualitatively from looking at the negatives in that context, the positives in that context at different layers, individual, group, community, national, you can also draw on statistics, right? So if you have any statistics that it's meaningful or it makes sense in what you're doing, of course, you can draw on that to help in your analysis. Then from there, the next step is to go to the objectives. And I think that for us so one thing I want us to do is that as community leaders or social media influencers, right? As we are going through this topic and after this topic, I want you to apply it to what you are doing in terms of your, be it engagements that you are planning to do, your spaces you are planning to do, etc. I want you to be able to apply it. So for example, define clear objectives. But the objectives are not really about, okay, I'm doing this space, or I'm doing this engagement. The objectives will really be about what you want to achieve, right? Which is basically what is the end game. Okay, so I will throw it back to you. What are some of your objectives? As part of this campaign, obviously you are aligned with our objectives. That's why you are part of the campaign. But let's say if you were to carry out a particular activity in your community or online, what will be some of your objectives, or what are some of the objectives you are pursuing? I want 2 volunteers. Okay.
I think this question is more for the community leaders. Would I be wrong?
Somebody say raise awareness. I think it applies to all of us actually. Even if social media influencers have may have some objectives. Okay, so I think maybe I'll still call people. So I'm going to call Naomi. Naomi, recently you had some engagements with environmental health officers in Kumasi. What were some of the objectives behind the action that you took?
Hey, I'm trying to.
Naomi, we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So I'm sorry, my thing was not muted. So yes, I met the environmental and health officers. The objective was to find a way that we can come together and support their advocacies, because from talking with them, I realized that they actually have community projects that they do with regards to the environment and health related, and there were some air activities in there. So the first thing was, how can we collaborate, and what are the activities that they are doing? How can we bring other, so the ones I met were in my district, but then how can I then bring on the others within the other districts? So those were, I think, the three key objectives. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you very much for sharing. Can somebody else share maybe some objectives of some of their actions?
Hello, Gameli. So I was going to say an objective can be community engagement. Yes, where I think Naomi mentioned some of the points where we could, in terms of all what we are doing, the end result or the end goal will be to engage a community. It could be in an activity, it could be in public education or raising awareness, but the end result or the objective would be to engage the community.
Okay, thank you very much, Benjamin. So, so some of the objectives that can be, for example, you said to raise awareness, which means that you want to increase what? Public awareness about air pollution. So if your objective is simply to raise awareness, it means that you are going to be focusing more on what? The messages that would help people to be aware of the problem in the first place, right? Especially awareness raising is very helpful, especially when this is your first time of engaging that audience, right, about this particular topic, because you don't want to start getting them to implement solutions when they are not even aware of the issue that you are engaging with and how important that issue is. So that could be a great objective, right? But I guess from a project point of view, you could, I think maybe that might be stretching it too far into the technical, but you can also look at some metrics, right? You don't just want to say you want to raise awareness, but you want to reach this number of people with this information within this time. That's one way to look at it. Your objectives could also be aligned specifically towards what you want to achieve at the end of the day, which is that you want to influence, I don't know, the adoption of proper waste segregation in the community, right? So that is an objective. Or you want to get, I don't know, 20 people to start cycling, to adopt cycling as an everyday means of transport. Okay, that is also a specific objective. Because depending on your objective, the objectives that you set for yourself, you can now begin to have a very clear target about that. You are going to have a very clear idea of the approach that you want to use. So let's take Naomi's. Let's just use maybe Naomi's point as an example, whereby she says that she wants to reach more people with information about air pollution, and she wants to reach more people in the community with information about air pollution. And she felt that maybe apart from just going to talk to people individually, she wants to engage with environmental health officers who are already covering a wide range of issues, and air pollution happens to be one of them, so that she can be able to support that process and amplify the message. So here you see that in your campaign or whatever activity, you can also take it activity by activity, activity by activity. So it doesn't mean that every activity you do has the same audience. So once you've defined your objectives, then it becomes easier for you to then identify who your target audience is. So for example, if your objective is to encourage tree planting in schools, then your target audience will be schools in your community. You get it. And then before you go ahead to actually approach them with any message, you want to be able to identify some schools there, profile them, and then if necessary, are there different types of schools and do you have different messages for them? Then you do your segmentation. Now, I will not go too much into profiling and segmenting your audience, simply because we can do a very simple way of profiling the audience, which is by using the socio-ecological model. So if you are looking at an individual, all the characteristics that we discussed before, what's their gender, what's their income, what's their level of education, what do they know, and what kind of behavior are they performing currently. That's profiling. If it's a group, then of course, what are the enabling factors in that environment, and what are the limiting factors in that environment? So analyzing that basically is the profiling that we are talking about. Then you can decide, for example, what is the medium of engagement that you are going to use. So, for example, Benjamin was already talking about, he said community engagement. So community engagement is really broad. Benjamin, what will be some of your approaches to community engagement that you might use?
Yes. So let's say you could come up with an activity. It could be like a tree planting activity, that would get people in the community involved in doing such an exercise, or it could be a cleanup exercise in your community. Then aside that too, it could be, let's say, a discussion, like a forum. Could be physical, where people can come together and then discuss on the topic.
Exactly. So these are some of the things. You could give a talk, you could have a discussion, you could do a Q&A, you could do a debate. Like you said, you can also do other types of activities, for example, cleanup, tree planting, etc. So the medium of engagement that you choose should help you reach your audience and should help you achieve your objectives. So that is the simple way. So in this case, for example, when we are talking about social media influencers, it means that a lot of the approaches that you're going to use will be online. So for example, we've seen a number of X spaces being done. I'm sure some people might want to do Instagram lives or Facebook lives. I don't know if Facebook lives are popular anymore. Somebody might want to do a particular video, right? They want to take their time and make a very clean video about process X or Y to show how to encourage positive behavior, you know, maybe in terms of waste management or cycling or tree planting, etc. You know, or they want to go and interview an expert. So that is a medium of engagement we are talking about, which in this case will be online, whilst also it's possible to have what activities done offline. Also using a particular approach, you know. In a previous project that I was involved in, people did things like brass band processions with their placards, what they call community storms, where they can go to like markets with all these different people who are part of the campaign, sharing information. There's just a wide variety of things that are possible. Obviously, what we've been doing already, the discussions we've been having in Barcamps, Connect, all of them are also engagement approaches. Then here we have a point here, which is decide a central theme. The idea behind a central theme is just to make whatever it is you are doing catchy, right? And it's usually already also part of your objectives. So I guess in the case of our campaign, for example, we use phrases like clean air for all, right? So this type of themes or topics actually help. Healthy cycling for healthy living or something like that, you know. It's oftentimes when you have a very catchy theme, it's something that even if all the talks that you have been having, talking about whatever campaign it is or whatever message that you're having, ultimately people will remember this theme, and then it becomes maybe the difference maker in your campaign. Then beyond a central theme, it's also often very useful to have some key messages. And the key messages usually have to do with the behaviors that we want people to continue performing, or the negative behaviors that we want them to change. So depending on what your approach is, your key messages will vary, right? So somebody who is trying to discourage burning of rubbish in their community will have key messages different from somebody who is trying to encourage clean cooking. They will also have key messages different from somebody who is talking about encouraging data collection about air quality, or somebody who is trying to encourage enforcement of regulations, you see. So your key messages depends on what? Depends on your objectives and the target audience, because you have to use language that your target audience can understand. So let's say just taking into consideration some of the ideas that you have that you want to pursue in promoting this campaign. What might be some of the key messages that you find yourself sharing with others? So let me just give an example in general. I remember last time I was on a Twitter space organized by one of our community leaders. And whilst we were talking, just because I guess most of the people on the space were people that I guess were more interested in learning more about what kind of action they can take, one of the key messages that we shared was reach out to groups organized groups that can give you the platform to amplify your message. So in this case, I was not necessarily talking about air quality directly, but I was giving a key message which has to do with a step that can be taken that at the end will be very effective and helpful to the campaign. So I think in that discussion, we talked a lot about engaging with chiefs and churches, etc. You know, what are some of the key messages that you find yourself giving out? Maybe I call a volunteer, Gideon. What are some of your key messages that you've been sharing so far when you are doing your meetings and your activities?
Hi, Gameli. Good evening. So, from our point, the key messages has been are more derived from the problems that are tuned to our communities. And so we've been looking at a lot of advocacy in the area of telling people to reduce the use of single plastics and advocating for other resources like tote bags. We've also been doing, even from our cleanup project, we've also been adding sensitization bit to educate the fisher folks, especially, who normally litter around the beach areas. And at the end of the day, people they gather it together and they burn all this rubbish. So we are also educating them on proper waste disposal as well. And the last bit we are looking at, or we've been talking about to do, is about engaging our mothers who normally engage in the fish smoking activities to find an alternative way. If we can come to a consensus and find them other things to use away from the usual that they are using. So most of the things, key messages we give out are based on the problems that we are facing in our community. And basically it's been the indiscriminate disposal, waste disposal, basically, and the fisher folks also not properly using the right tools to work. So that's where we churn most of our key information from.
Okay, thank you. I think one key message that I gleaned from your inputs right now is avoid using single-use plastics. Okay, so that's like a key message right there. Kola has given us some examples. I'll read one of them. He says, "Be the change you want to see." Yeah, that's a good one. But then, as often as possible, you also don't want it to be too generic. You get it. So maybe you can make it to be more specific, in the sense that you want people to then be able to take action based on, how do you call it? Based on the message. So, for example, be the change you want to see, stop littering indiscriminately, something like that. Then it's more action-oriented. Somebody says, "I've made a conscious effort to plant lemongrass and aloe vera and pineapples in my backyard. Some plants are natural air purifiers." Okay, so your key message is what? Plant lemongrass and pineapples. No, is a pineapple also a natural purifier? Maybe, I don't know. I don't know. Use plants to purify your natural environment or something like that. So this will be some examples of key messages. Please, let's take these points into consideration. Okay, it is very, very important to have your key messages, usually 3 or 4, already ready before you go out to do any campaign, space, etc. Ask yourself, what is the point of all these things that I'm coming to do? What do I want to achieve with it? And come out with messages that will resonate with your audience, okay? So that as you are performing the activity, you keep repeating those messages. You don't have to use the same words over and over again, but you keep sharing the same messages in one way or the other, because the repetition helps to drive home the point, and it actually works. It actually works. I remember when I was in my master's, we had a session where we had we were coming in as scientists. Interestingly, it was something that we did with a journalism program. So they were coming in as journalists, we were coming in as scientists. We got trained on science communication. And then they did all kinds of interviews, radio, TV, etc., like all kinds of interviews. And after that, they played whatever it is that we were saying back to us to identify our, they played it back to us for us to identify what we were doing right that should continue, and then identify our weaknesses that we can improve on. It was quite interesting. And within that, we already trained, have your key messages, right? So as a scientist, you go out there and somebody's asking you a question about, I don't know, a particular project that's been done in the community, what will be its impact, this, that. You already have your messages to share, right? Because if you go out there, you are going to be asked a lot of questions and you don't want to distract from the key purpose of what you are doing. And so those are your 3-4 key messages is what you would keep sharing to drive home the points, you know, which has to do with the positive behaviors that you want to encourage in your community that would lead to positive health benefits and other benefits for your community. So please, let's really take this idea of having clear objectives, identifying our audience and understanding them, coming up with our theme and coming up with our key messages. Let's take it seriously. And then beyond developing these messages, now you can now go ahead and craft an action plan that will allow you to clearly carry out your campaign and for you to be able to achieve the objectives. And of course, at the end of the campaign, you want to measure your performance. Again, we can go more into any of these areas if people have questions about that. But measuring the performance can be as simple as when you are setting your objectives, you are very specific in terms of your reach, how many people you want to reach, or the change you want to see. It was very clear in your objective. So in your performance, you ask yourself, have I achieved what I want to achieve? And I'm sure some of you can also already see the link between some of the points we are making here and some of your activities that you're already doing, where we are asking you to, after you've done your activity, to capture some data around your activity, etc., etc. This is just to show that whatever it is that you are doing, you are getting some results from it. Do we have any more questions at this point? I think there was some comments. Let me go to the comment. Okay, people are sharing more key messages. Yes, okay, so Kola was helping me out with Francis's key message. He says the key message will be plant a tree today, yeah? And then another one will be, the key message will be that some plants are natural air purifiers, yes. Yes, that's a good message. But another, I just want to add that also it often helps to be more action-oriented when you are crafting key messages. Because remember, you want to instigate behavior change. So I favor more, I think this one is more of personal, but I favor more of telling people or making suggestions about behavior change in your key message rather than just passively passing on some information. Not to say that sharing information is not a key message, but you can also consider it to be more action-oriented. Okay, so let's continue. So here, I just want to share some, just a sort of like, if you wanted to craft an action plan, for example, how do you go about it? There's also something called a theory of change. I think it's a whole topic that can be taught in 3 days workshop. So I'm not going to talk about theory of change in any detail, but just to give you an idea that if you are carrying out any project or any activity, it's helpful to build a link between the objectives that you set for yourself all the way to the impact that you want to create. And so oftentimes it's helpful to break down your objectives having decided your objectives, is helpful to, before coming out with your project activities, it's helpful to understand what inputs you have at your disposal. So the input involves how much money do you have at your disposal, what is a human resource that you can count on, and maybe the infrastructure or facilities available to you. So that would inform which activities you should do. Simply cut your cloth according to your size. Sorry, is that it? Cut your coat according to your cloth, yeah. And also, obviously, when you've actually carried out some activities, how will the immediate outputs of your activities help you to achieve measurable outcomes? And how can that measurable outcome help you to achieve what impact? Normally, when we are talking of impact, it goes beyond your project, but also involves things like, it depends. Like, for example, there's a national policy in place that has certain goals that you want your thing to contribute to. So you can look at impact from that level, or even something like the Sustainable Development Goals. You can look at impact from that level. But you don't want to just go and perform an activity in itself. You should be able to measure it, which is the immediate outputs of your activity. How many people did you reach? And then the outcome is, after that, out of the people you've reached, how many of them have actually performed the behavior you're looking at? So yeah, it's also a whole topic on its own. We could look at it in future if people are interested. And then what I want to emphasize here is the importance of coming up with your action plan, which is basically looking at the activity that you want to perform and breaking it down into sub-activities. So if, for example, if you wanted to organize a cleanup activity, right? What steps do you need to take to successfully organize your cleanup activity? So those will be your sub-activities. Will you do all these activities by yourself, or somebody else is needed? What kind of resources do you need? Do you need a flyer? Do you need to make a radio announcement somewhere? Do you need money, etc.? When are you going to do it? And what are you going to use? So the KPI here means key performance indicators. What will you use to measure the success of your activity? So at a high level, this is what this is about. So again, I'll encourage you to look at, so for example, the community leaders, you have offline, at least one offline activity that you can join, or that you may need to organize with air quality champions in your community. So you can have a discussion with them about what activity can you do, especially the ones that have air quality champions in your community. And then you can use this table, for example, to help you to just, frame this, nicely. And I know that some of you have also been asked, especially the social media influencers, to share your upcoming online activities, your spaces, etc. You could also use something like this to do it. But of course, you can also use whatever guidelines your lead is sharing as well. This action plan becomes very helpful, especially when you are carrying out something which is very complex, not just one activity, but let's say you are carrying out a campaign on activity that has 2-3 different elements. So you actually use this action plan to make it easier for you to track what it is you are doing and who else is involved in it. So just to give some tips quickly. We talked about identifying your target audience. So your target audience can be a range of actors, from policymakers, community leaders, existing environmental activists, health workers, etc. We talked about understanding the context. We talked about setting the objectives. I would also like to add that depending on who you are talking to, the language should be considered. Do you want to use local language, or do you want to use English? If If you're using English, do you want to use less technical language because of who you are talking to? For example, if you're speaking to kids in a primary school, you want to make sure the language matches what they are aware of. Also, don't be afraid to involve community leaders, influential people, and also to bring volunteers if those volunteers will help you achieve your objectives. And I can see from, especially from our spaces that we are organizing so far, people bringing in their friends, their colleagues, other people they've collaborated with, you know, bringing in diverse voices actually enriches these types of conversations. So I think that that is fantastic. And don't be boring like me, like the way I'm running this session. Try to keep things more active. Yeah. Okay, so I just want to summarize this by saying that air pollution is one of those things that we call is a wicked problem, because understanding it goes beyond just technical issues, right? The social aspect is key. In fact, even the finance, everything, different elements come into play. So everybody should be involved in contributing to the solution. And I also want to share that, as you can see from this SBCC model that we've discussed today, it requires thorough planning, but at the same time, also it needs a lot of creativity to be able to plan and execute an effective campaign. And finally, it's very important that, yes, we keep on learning, but it's actually more important to act in the specific context in which you are. So I'm going to stop here. I think we've almost exhausted our 2 hours, but then I will then open now for any questions or any specific inputs before we close. Yeah, thank you. Hello. Do we have any questions, comments, etc.? Okay, so I guess I will call some volunteers to share with us maybe 1 or 2 things that they've learned from today's session. So can I call Rahina? Okay. Can I call Christabel? No volunteer to share anything they've picked from today? Can I call?
Hello, guys.
Okay, Esther, go ahead.
Yeah. Good evening.
Good evening.
So one takeaway is using the SMART, that's specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-based, and executing some of the steps that the steps for our activities as CLs or SMIs. Okay. To help us educate our objectives very well, and then aid us in our strategic approach on some of the objectives that we put ahead of us. For example, like creating awareness, that's one of the SMI talked about, and then even if I guess correctly, want to talk about it.
Okay, thank you very much. So Esther is saying that she's learned more about setting objectives and making sure that those objectives match the activities that they will be undertaking to achieve the right results. Okay. Do you have any other volunteer? I see Chelsea has unmuted herself. Do you want to come in?
Oh, okay. So I wanted to focus on the kind of language in our communication, so that the information being disseminated will be, very clear. Most of the times we tend to use certain words that might not necessarily, be understood by the people we are communicating to. So whether you are a social media influencer or you are a community engagement person, you should know how to use the right words in your communication.
Thank you very much, Chelsea, for this point. Yes. So the language, the kind of language you use, it's also very key in being very effective, because the language should be appropriate to your audience so that they can understand you very well. Christabel, no worries. Seen your comments about your speaker not working. That's fine. Yeah, thanks for letting us know. Okay.
Knowing your target is also a key factor here.
Yes, knowing your target audience is also very, very key. Yes, thank you very much for sharing these insights.
That you also engage our children at home too, because they are actually on my side. They are the people that I'm focusing more on.
Great, yeah. Thank you very much, Esther, Chelsea, and thanks everybody for joining today's session. I think it was great. I am open to feedback, so you can send me feedback on WhatsApp or even post in the groups that we've created for you.
Can we get the presentation you shared?
Yes. Yeah, I've seen. I think Kola was asking, or was it Francis? And yeah, definitely we can share these slides with you as well, so that you can have a kind of like closer, how do you say it? You can go through them again at your own pace. And feel free to send us any suggestions for when, so that when we are crafting the next set of workshops, they will fit into what will be helpful and relevant to you as well. Yeah, but I'll just pause here and say thanks to everybody who has joined us. It was well attended. I hope that in the future we will have even more attendance in the workshops with our air quality champion. As I said before in one of the WhatsApp groups, the air quality champions are also there to support us in all our activities that we are planning to do. And therefore, it will be helpful to, if you need any technical expertise in the sessions you are planning or activities you are doing, reach out to us, and then we can match you to the right expert as well. I think the last time we did an introduction, and we can do that in the next sessions that we'll be organizing as well. Well, I think I've already rounded up the session, but if any of our AQCs want to come in to just make quick comments, 1 minute, that's also open to you. I think we have Kelvin still on. The other ones we have left already. Kelvin, do you have any passing words for us?
Yeah, hello.
Hello, yeah. I was asking whether you have any passing words for us.
Yeah, so I wanted to add something small that sometimes cost in all these things become a barrier. But then there is always it's always good that we find a no cost intervention. We try as much as possible to find a no cost intervention. So, for example, at our project that we are doing in Accra, we reach out to the municipal authorities. Most of them will tell you that they are budget constrained, so they can't organize what's the name, community engagement activities to work on awareness creation. So we sat down and then we developed a manual, a sensitization manual. At least it is no cost. It's no cost. So we gave it, we've been training the municipal authorities to carry on, do the sensitization, which is of no cost to the assembly. So we should try as much as possible to always find a no cost strategy or a low cost strategy, and let us not let financial resources be a constraint. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that's a very powerful point, which is trying to undertake activities that can already match our budget, and it should be possible to have a no cost or low cost interventions where possible. So yeah, I think very good point. Thank you very much for sharing, Kelvin. I just dropped a link to the Breathe Accra. That's the project that Kelvin is part of. So you can, if you are not already familiar with it, you can visit their website and learn more about them. Okay. Ato, do you have any parting words for us before we go?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I'm really excited that we've had this first workshop. And, you know, we have AQC, CL, and different minds on the call. Learned a lot from the first meeting. Gameli, thanks a lot for the tips on some of the things that we can implement. I think there are a few action items that I think you kind of mentioned within your presentation that we have to actually go out and do. So let's try and get those done. And for everyone else, we are here to support, get some of those actions done. So thanks a lot. And yeah, I think we have a number of spaces and things coming up. So please, let's try and schedule them as early as possible and communicate them as early as possible so that we can get, you know, try and drive as much engagement as possible as well. Yeah, I will just ask, as we are ending, if it's possible for people to turn on their video so we can take a group picture. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's very key. I just dropped the link to Breathe Accra, but also the Kigali Cafe Day. I think there's some information about that.